Something huge is brewing at the US-Canada border. And no, you're not going to see it splashed across every nightly newscast. While the mainstream press drowns people in endless drama from Washington, Donald Trump has been quietly shifting pieces on the board. He's making real moves. Moves that don't just create headlines for a day, but actually reshape how this border functions and who holds the power. And let's be brutally clear, for Trump, it all comes down to power. It's about making sure the rules of this border aren't dictated by Ottawa or politely negotiated over a conference table. He wants America setting the terms, and now Canadian officials are stumbling, trying to figure out how to react. Meanwhile, some media outlets are absolutely losing their minds because Trump doesn't nibble around the edges. When he targets a problem, he goes straight for the heart of it. That's exactly what's unfolding right now. For months, the entire spotlight has been on the chaos at the southern border, but while everyone's eyes are glued down there, something entirely different has been happening up north, quietly, almost in the shadows, and the mainstream press has barely touched it. Canada has been forced to ratchet up security on its side of the border in response to Trump's scrutiny and policies. Remember when Trump imposed tariffs on Canada while claiming fentanyl was flooding in from the north? The reality, according to US data, is that less than 1% of fentanyl seizures actually trace back to Canada. But facts rarely slow down Trump's strategy. He turned up the pressure anyway, and now Canada is scrambling. Drug detection dogs are being deployed, drones are flying patrols, border agents, who weren't even stationed there a year ago, are now in uniform. Boots on the ground. From fentanyl to firearms, the Canadian Border Services Agency has been forced into action. Why? Because Trump's gaze is locked on them. And that's the difference here. While Canadian politicians shuffle paper, hold hearings, and deliver empty speeches, Trump has been making actual changes, shifting resources, and shaking things up in a way that Ottawa never saw coming. This isn't about polite diplomacy or endless working groups. This is about sending a message. The days of easy crossings, soft agreements, and lopsided deals are finished. From his very first term, Trump made it clear that he doesn't view borders as harmless lines on a map. He views them as points of control. Whoever controls those points doesn't just manage geography. They control the flow of goods, people, and influence. And right now, with trade disputes boiling and energy battles simmering, the US-Canada border is no longer some quiet afterthought. It's becoming just as politically explosive as the southern border. Insiders in Washington had been whispering for months that Trump's approach toward Canada was going to be different this time. But no one predicted this scale of direct confrontation. Forget the tired, scripted playbook, no more roundtables. No more watered-down agreements. Trump has gone for the jugular. He's tying together every single issue: illegal crossings, drug pipelines, firearms smuggling, foreign goods sneaking in under weak tariffs, and forcing Ottawa to face it all at once. And the money? He's already bragging about it. We're taking in almost $2 billion a day in tariffs. $2 billion? That's what Trump tells his audience. And whether you agree with his style or not, the numbers speak volumes. Those tariffs aren't just cash flowing into American coffers. They're leverage. Leverage to pressure Ottawa. Leverage to bend the system. Leverage to make sure that Canada can't just ignore the demands. What Ottawa didn't expect was how Trump would link everything together. For decades, politicians on both sides of the border acted like these were separate silos. Tariffs over here, smuggling over there, immigration in a different pile. But Trump, he's tying the strings, pulling them tight, and saying, fix all of it. Now, and Canadians are shocked because he doesn't budge. When Trump draws a line, it doesn't move just because Ottawa whines about it. This time, it isn't just rhetoric. Trump is rolling out an actual plan aimed directly at what he calls Canada's open door chaos. And this plan is no small tweak. We're talking about serious tightening of the northern border, expanded drone surveillance, tougher screenings, stricter protocols for anyone trying to cross. He's putting into place mechanisms that are going to fundamentally change the way this border works. And here's the part that makes Canada's leadership sweat and the media gnash their teeth. This isn't even primarily about illegal migrants sneaking across. Trump's team has spent months gathering data on the flow of drugs, guns, and even people moving quietly through one of the calmest borders in the world. They have the numbers, and they're convinced it's a growing threat. Ottawa, of course, insists everything's under control. But we've heard that song before. The truth is, when Trump steps in, the pressure lands hard and fast. The ripple effects aren't just about security. They hit the economy. They hit trade. They hit Canada's already strained social programs. Think about tariffs again. The US isn't just collecting revenue, it's stacking bargaining chips. And those chips are being cashed in to force Ottawa into facing questions it would rather bury. Take Canada's old age security program. As baby boomers retire, costs are set to skyrocket. Federal spending on this one program is projected to explode from nearly $78 billion in 2023 to a staggering $277 billion by 2060. That's more than triple. Ottawa has been dodging this ticking time bomb for years. But now, under Trump's tariff pressure, groups like Generation Squeeze are warning the system is about to collapse. They're even floating radical ideas, like asking pensioners to delay collecting benefits if they can afford it. Think about how shocking that is. Ordinary Canadians, who worked their whole lives and were promised financial security and retirement, are now being told, wait longer, take less, sacrifice more. And why now? Because Trump's policies are exposing the cracks that Ottawa has papered over for decades. He's basically forcing Canada to admit the ugly truth, that its finances, its border, and its leadership are a mess. And this is just the beginning. New surveillance tech is already being rolled out. More inspections, stricter screening, and outdated loopholes are being slammed shut. And Ottawa, they're running out of excuses. Trump has made the northern border a frontline issue, and Canadian officials are scrambling to keep up. What we're watching unfold at the Canada-US border is not some small skirmish. It is a full-blown shift in how North America is going to operate. And Ottawa was not prepared. For years, Canadian leaders convinced themselves that the northern border didn't matter, that it was quiet, stable, and basically irrelevant compared to the southern one. They told Canadians that everything was under control, but Trump has shredded that illusion in real time. The most explosive piece here is not even the border patrols, the dogs, or the drones. It's the fact that Trump is forcing a conversation about accountability, something Ottawa has avoided for decades. Look at the ICE custody reports. When headlines screamed that nearly 150 Canadians had been detained, the media spun it as if innocent citizens were being swept up in some authoritarian crackdown. But dig deeper. Over 70% of those people had criminal records. The other 30% were in the United States illegally. That's the reality the Canadian government doesn't want its people to see. For years, foreign nationals with Canadian papers were quietly being counted as ordinary Canadians, creating the illusion of chaos while hiding the real problem. It wasn't about innocent travelers being harassed. It was about criminals slipping through the cracks and Ottawa refusing to acknowledge it. Trump blew the cover off that scam, and now the truth is impossible to ignore. This is why Trump's critics are always left sputtering. They say he's reckless, unpresidential, divisive. But here's the uncomfortable fact. He doesn't care about optics. He doesn't waste his time on polished press releases or carefully worded diplomatic statements. He only cares about results, and the results are hitting Ottawa like a hammer. Take a look at how he exposes the hypocrisy of the Democrats. They have spent years pretending to be morally opposed to border walls and fences, yet Trump has thrown their own words back in their faces. He reminds people that, as senators, many of them voted multiple times to fund barriers, to tighten security, to stop illegal crossings. They used to believe in it until Trump made it his policy. Then, suddenly, the very same Democrats flipped, not because of principle, but because of politics. And Trump is not backing down. We need the wall. We need border security. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. That's his pledge. He calls out the double standard, and then he delivers the enforcement to prove he's serious. Canadian officials are left flailing because they've built their entire narrative on the idea that the northern border was a sideshow. Trump is making it the main event. But it doesn't stop at border patrols or detention stats. Trump is also exposing how Ottawa spends taxpayer dollars, and this is where the outrage should be boiling over in every Canadian household. Internal government documents revealed that Canadian officials quietly spent at least $170,000 to repatriate 8 women and their children from the Middle East in 2022 and 2023. These weren't stranded tourists. These were individuals who traveled overseas to align themselves with extremist groups. And Ottawa treated it like a routine admin job, shipping them home on the taxpayer's dime. Add in personnel costs, transportation, and logistics, and the real bill easily passed $200. So while ordinary Canadians are being told to tighten their belts, wait longer for retirement benefits, and pay higher taxes, Ottawa is funneling public money into rescuing people who actively supported dangerous organizations abroad. That is the kind of insanity Trump highlights with every policy move. He forces the uncomfortable contrast into the spotlight. Canada looks weak, disorganized, and unserious, while he presents himself as the man bringing order to chaos. And make no mistake, the tariff weapon is only part of it. Trump is also leveraging defense and security partnerships. The so-called Golden Dome initiative is one example. By tying Canada's defense obligations more tightly to US standards, Trump is ensuring that Ottawa cannot freeload on America's security blanket while ignoring the cracks at home. For decades, Canada has been happy to play the role of the junior partner, reaping the benefits of proximity to the world's strongest military without paying the full price. Trump is making sure those days are numbered. This is why Canadian politicians are suddenly acting nervous. They've realized that the game has changed. They can no longer ignore loopholes, outdated agreements, and rising smuggling pipelines without consequences. Trump has positioned the northern border as a bargaining chip in trade negotiations, a political battlefield in the culture war, and a real test of Ottawa's competence. And so far, Ottawa is failing every test. Even the Canadian media, which usually plays defense for the government, has struggled to spin this one. They want to paint Trump's actions as heavy-handed or unnecessary, but the data he cites exposes them: drugs, weapons, unauthorized crossings. These aren't conspiracy theories. They are measurable problems that Ottawa has ignored. By confronting them head-on, Trump has flipped the narrative. He's made it impossible for Ottawa to hide behind polite language and bureaucratic excuses. But here's the kicker. The ripple effects are just beginning. The tariffs are not just squeezing Ottawa's finances, they're also reshaping the Canadian economy in ways that threaten to destabilize the very programs Canadians have been told they can rely on. Old age security, employment insurance, child benefits. These are already massive parts of the budget. And Trump's pressure is forcing Ottawa to rethink how they are funded. Generation Squeeze is right to warn that the system is on the brink. It is simply unsustainable to promise trillions in benefits, while simultaneously hemorrhaging money on failed border policies and weak trade deals. For decades, Canada has played a dangerous game of pretending it could have it both ways. Open borders and secure trade, generous benefits and low taxes, sovereignty and dependence on the US. Trump is tearing that illusion apart. He's showing Canadians that they can't have it all. And if Ottawa refuses to make hard choices, the United States will make those choices for them. And this is where the anger should be directed, not at Trump, but at the Canadian leadership that let things get this bad. Ottawa had every opportunity to secure the border, modernize agreements, and prepare for demographic shifts. They didn't. They buried their heads in the sand, betting that no one would force them to confront reality. Well, that bet just collapsed. Trump has forced the confrontation. What comes next is uncertain. But one thing is crystal clear. The Canada-US border will never again be treated as a quiet backwater. Trump has made it a frontline political issue, and Ottawa can no longer dodge the consequences. At the end of the day, what we are seeing at the Canada-US border is nothing less than a revolution. For years, Canadian officials and their media allies treated border issues as background noise, something they could spin or downplay whenever it flared up. But Trump has ripped that comfort zone to shreds. He's forced accountability onto a system that was built to avoid it. And accountability is exactly what Ottawa fears most. When Trump tightens surveillance, rolls out drones, or slams tariffs, he doesn't just change policy, he changes the conversation. Suddenly, Canadians are asking why their government allowed loopholes and outdated agreements to fester for decades. They're asking why fentanyl, firearms, and smuggling pipelines were ignored until Trump forced action. They're asking why billions in retirement promises were made without a plan to pay for them. And Ottawa has no good answers. Trump's approach is blunt, sometimes even brasher, but it gets results. When he says borders matter, he proves it by building systems that actually work. When he says rules matter, he enforces them, even when it makes elites uncomfortable. And when he says results matter, he delivers outcomes that no amount of polished speeches from Ottawa can match. This is what Canadian leadership has been terrified of all along. They know that Trump's actions expose their own incompetence. For years, they've hidden behind the illusion of control, counting on a compliant media to smooth over the cracks. But now the cracks are gaping holes. Border Patrol stats, ICE reports, tariff revenue. These aren't partisan talking points. They are hard facts that Canadians can see with their own eyes. Consider how stark the contrast has become. On one hand, you have Ottawa spending hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars to bring back individuals who aligned with extremist groups overseas. They do this quietly, hoping no one will notice. On the other hand, you have Trump using enforcement and leverage to demand accountability, making sure criminals and smugglers face consequences. Which approach looks like leadership? Which approach protects citizens? The answer is obvious. And let's not forget the political theater playing out in the background. Democrats in the United States are being called out for their hypocrisy. They once supported fences, walls, and barriers until Trump championed them. Suddenly they reversed course. Not out of principle, but out of spite. Trump has exposed them as frauds. And in the process, he has highlighted how Ottawa has been playing the same game pretending to care about security while quietly enabling dysfunction. The message is simple. Enough with the illusions, enough with the excuses. Canadians deserve leaders who don't just talk about border security but actually deliver it. They deserve policies that protect taxpayers instead of wasting their money. They deserve a government that doesn't fold the moment Washington applies pressure, but instead stands firm with real solutions. Yet what they have is a government scrambling from crisis to crisis, hoping the media can cover their tracks. Trump, meanwhile, has turned the northern border into a showcase for his philosophy of leadership. It's not about endless meetings or polite compromises. It's about taking bold steps that produce immediate results. Whether you like him or not, you can't deny the impact. Ottawa is being forced to confront decades of negligence, and the consequences are reshaping everything from trade to social programs. Even the old age security debate proves the point. Canadians were told for years that their pensions were safe, guaranteed, untouchable, but the numbers don't lie. Costs are tripling. The system is buckling, and think tanks are now urging seniors to delay benefits. That kind of shock doesn't happen overnight. It happens after decades of political cowardice. Trump's tariffs and pressure have simply ripped the mask off, forcing the truth into the open. And the truth is brutal. Canada's leadership has failed. They failed to secure the border. They failed to modernize agreements. They failed to protect taxpayers. They failed to prepare for demographic and economic realities. And now, because Trump has stepped in, the failures can no longer be hidden. So what does this mean going forward? It means the Canada-US relationship has entered a new phase, one defined not by polite diplomacy, but by hard accountability. It means Canadian politicians will have to answer for their decisions in ways they never expected. And it means ordinary Canadians will start asking tougher questions about where their money is going, why their borders are porous, and why their leaders seem more concerned with optics than results. Trump has shown that leadership isn't about pleasing everyone or crafting the perfect soundbite. It's about producing outcomes that change reality on the ground. The drones in the sky, the patrols on the border, the tariffs reshaping trade, those are tangible. Those are undeniable, and they prove that when Trump says something will happen, it happens. Meanwhile, Ottawa looks weaker by the day. Each new revelation, from taxpayer-funded repatriations to ballooning pension costs, reminds Canadians that their government is reactive, not proactive. They wait until crisis strikes, and then they scramble. But crisis management isn't leadership. It's survival, and survival mode cannot last forever. This is why Trump's actions resonate far beyond the border itself. They send a message to Canadians, Americans, and the world. Borders matter, rules matter, accountability matters. If Ottawa won't enforce those principles, Washington will, and that reality should terrify anyone still clinging to the fantasy that Canada can drift along without making hard choices. At the end of the day, the northern border is no longer just a line on a map. It's a battleground for sovereignty, trade, security, and truth. Trump has drawn that battle line, and Ottawa has no choice but to face it. The age of illusions is over. The era of accountability has begun. So the next time you hear Canadian officials reassure you that everything is fine, remember this moment. Remember the dogs, the drones, the tariffs, the ICE reports, the exploding pension costs, and the taxpayer-funded rescues. Remember how quickly their illusions collapsed once real pressure was applied. And remember who forced them to confront reality. Because love him or hate him, Donald Trump has changed the game, and Canada will never be the same.